Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode, Greg and I review two legendary 60mm f2.8 macro lenses from the 1970s. On the one hand, we have the Leitz Elmarit-R for the Leica R mount, which was first introduced in 1972. On the other hand, we take a look at the Carl Zeiss S-Planar for the Yashica Contax mount, which was released in 1975. The Leitz lens has a reproduction ratio of 1:2 by default, but can be used in combination with the Macro-Adapter-R adapter and then offers 1:1 reproduction ratios. In contrast, the Carl Zeiss S-Planar comes with true 1:1 reproduction ratios, so you can go all the way to a 1:1 reproduction. There's a cheaper version of the lens, and these two should not be confused, that comes with a similar optical design, but only goes to a 1:2 reproduction ratio. It's called a C-Planar lens, and this will not be discussed in this review, so we focus on the true 1:1 S-Planar version. Both lenses can be purchased on the second-hand market for around €350 these days, but depending on the condition and the age, they can sell significantly higher. Greg purchased his Leitz lens in the year 2000, new, and I got my lens here, the Carl Zeiss one, together with the Contax RTS from my aunt, who was the original owner and purchased it in the late 1970s. We tested the lenses shooting a couple of macros. I had taken the Carl Zeiss lens out into the Botanical garden here in Munich a couple of times prior to the real winter setting in. And then when I recently visited Greg, I brought the camera and the lens, and we did the actual comparison, shooting a couple of watches, so mechanical watches from our two collections. Some close-ups in different lighting conditions. We didn't have a proper light tent, but at least we had a couple of bulbs and got some really decent results in our opinion. So you will see a couple more images from the Carl Zeiss lens taken in the Botanical garden, but of course we tried to have some comparative images here as well with the mechanical watches. Let's dive in there. So let's look at the basics and the optical design of these two macro lenses. The Leitz Elmarit-R was designed by Heinz Marquardt in 1967 with 6 elements in 5 groups. The minimum focusing distance is 0.27 meters without any adapter and up to 0.18 millimeters, so around 7 inches with the Macro-Adapter-R. The lens is made from anodized aluminum and optical glass and weighs around 400 grams. And in the course of its production era that lasted from 1972 all the way up to 2009, there were around 46,500 lenses produced, and it underwent 3 iterations. The first iteration is a so-called 2-cam version with a separate hood. The second one was a so-called 3-cam version that came with a built-in hood. And the last version that we have here is characterized by its support for the so-called R module. For compatibility with your Leica R body or SL body, please check the typical compatibility charts when looking at one of the lenses to ensure that you don't have to upgrade the lens after purchasing it. The Carl Zeiss lens was the world's first macro photo lens featuring a double helicoid systems that allow object reproduction from infinity all the way up to life size without any kind of extension tube or adapter. So this was really a world's first. It comes with an almost symmetrical planar lens design with 6 elements in 4 groups. and the minimum focusing distance here is 0.24 meters with one scale for the 1:2 reproduction, ending at 0.27 meters, and then another scale, if you go a little bit further, for the 1:1 life-size reproduction. The lens weighs 570 grams and is thus significantly heavier than the Leitz design. Both lenses share the same aperture range from f2.8 all the way down to f22. So what are the typical application fields for these lenses and how do they perform and compare optically? Well, obviously both lenses are made for close distance photography, any sort of that. So in the past it was really document copying, scientific lab applications, but also any kind of other close-up photography and even portraits. What is interesting here for both lenses is that they were created to be versatile and potentially also replace your 50mm or 60mm standard lens. And because of that, they can also be used for shooting at infinity focusing distances or anything in between. So if you need to transition quickly for a portrait session, for instance, between a true close-up and then something that is more a natural portrait distance, both lenses work perfectly fine for these applications here as well. The older Leitz lens was already designed in 1967, as I mentioned, and had decades of production time. And in that time span, the optical design was not really adapted, so it basically remained the same throughout the entire time. And that, of course, is a testament to the excellent optical design and thought that went into this lens design. And this performance was also very much apparent when we tested it here, shooting our mechanical watches. Optically, we simply couldn't find anything to complain about. The lens offers excellent color rendition and details throughout the entire frame, so really high resolution and beautiful color renditions. In direct light, the resistance to flare was also fairly limited, and at close range, and especially when you stop down to f8 and f11, you get excellent results and a completely perfectly flat focus plane. And of course, these were optimized to get exactly this effect. The bokeh is really nice and pleasant, but I would say unremarkable, especially in comparison to lenses that are entitled a king of bokeh and offer much better 3D pop, so you can really see the lenses were not designed to be outstanding in that field, but were rather optimized for closer distances, and you can really see that here with the Leitz lens. Looking at more advanced features like fall off and soft corners and so forth, we saw hardly any fall off towards the corners, hardly any vignetting. Only when shot wide open you get slightly softer corners, but this is of course a common effect, and if you use it wisely and correctly and really get the most sharpness out of the lens, you would stop it down to f8 anyways, and once you do that you don't have these effects anymore, so you can really see how much it was optimized for close distance photography. The micro contrast is a little bit lower when compared to a modern macro lens, but it's still excellent, and especially given the time it was created and the time it was produced, the long time span, you can see, okay, it really lives up to modern lenses, almost at least. The Carl Zeiss S-Planar optical design is more or less outstanding as well and lives up to similar quality standards. So it was also optimized for flatness of field to avoid any other typical types of aberrations that you get at close distance shooting. So the lens is still well suited for greater distances as well, but it really shines and stands out at closer distances. In our tests, shooting watches or plants in the Botanical Garden, we basically had incredible color renditions that you can see here with these fall and winter plants. We got incredible sharpness and especially really high resolutions, and on many occasions I noticed details in the frame that I couldn't see with my bare eyes, so I really had to look through the lens, get the 1-to-1 reproduction ratio and see then life size what was actually in there. That happened to me repeatedly, and that is of course the great macro effect that you can have when shooting these kinds of lenses. We didn't see any kind of downfalls with this lens either. The in-focus areas are perfectly sharp, the resolution is really high, the color reproduction is nice, and again, only when shot wide open it gets a little bit softer towards the corner and you might see some fall off here and there, but once you stop down, again, it's recommended to go for f8 or even further. You get an incredible sharpness across the entire frame, and you can really see that it was optimized for that flat application that we also had here with the watch dials. So optically speaking, these two lenses are definitely on par, and we couldn't see any winner here in terms of optical quality. So what about the handling and our personal impressions beyond the optical performance of these two lenses? So both lenses feel fantastic in your hands. The aperture rings, the focusing rings, and also the overall build quality is simply outstanding. Just what you would expect from a Leica or Carl Zeiss lens. And even after decades of being in use, they are still wonderful to handle and look also beautiful, and all it needs is the occasional little cleaning, and that's it. So with respect to that, they're both outstanding and there's nothing to compare here. Both lenses also have pretty recessed lenses, so they don't really need a lens hood in my opinion. As mentioned, there are lens hoods for them, and in some cases for the Leitz one there is also a built-in hood. But you don't necessarily need that. Only in certain situations it might be advisable to use a lens hood. In most, I would say it's not. What is also interesting or remarkable from a design perspective is the typography and the markings of these lenses. For me, these really bring out this 1970s flavor, and you can see where these lenses came from and also the kind of quality that both Leitz and Carl Zeiss put into them. Personally, I'm really fond of the Leica typography here applied to the lens, but one could argue something similar for the Carl Zeiss. It also looks really, really beautiful overall. So it's really a matter of personal preferences. What I also like about both lenses is that, of course, they can be adapted using Contax Yashica mount adapter or a Leica R mount adapter to all sorts of modern camera systems, digital cameras as well, of course. So that makes it great and easily accessible for a wide variety of people to just get one of these manual focusing lenses and just play around with them. And I really, really like that. And the only major downsides that you could discuss when comparing these two lenses is, of course, about the weight, heftiness, and related to that, the reproduction ratio that they offer. Because here, if you look at the Leitz lens, it's a little bit bulkier than a standard 50mm lens, and still offers you quite some versatility because it lets you shoot 1:2 reproduction ratio images without any adapter. And even if you want to do 1:1, you just add the adapter like we did in our case here, and you're good to go. In comparison to that, the Carl Zeiss with the 570 grams is of course significantly heavier than the 400 gram Leitz lens. And you can feel that. It's not the kind of lens that you just carry around easily. I would say it's typically preferable to use it with a strap. And it also looks a little bit funny when it's fully extended because of kind of the size of that lens and all the range that it can support from infinity to true life size. So it really comes down to how often you use true life size and whether it's important to you to not have an adapter for it, and whether you want to transition between life size and more natural distances that you would typically shoot with a 50 or 60 millimeter focal length lens. So this is basically the main point, and the big question is now which one to choose. In my opinion, both lenses are excellent, both optically, visually, and in terms of handling. So it really comes down to your preferences in terms of camera system and lens system, and maybe you've already bought into one of the systems, and that's where one of them is more interesting to you. If you are very fond of the Leica R system, the 60mm f2.8 macro is a great addition to the collection, and I can highly recommend it. And just shooting macros per se is so much fun, and was for me also really enlightening again to do it and to learn more about it. Shooting some plants in the Botanical garden, it just encouraged me to do that more often, basically. And the same holds true, of course, for the Carl Zeiss. If you already appreciate the vintage Carl Zeiss glass and you know, okay, I just need to purchase this adapter for my digital camera, or to just go out there and purchase a vintage Contax RTS, for instance, then I can highly recommend to do that as well. I'm super happy with my setup here in the Contax RTS. It's a wonderful camera, it's a wonderful lens. And as I said, I just occasionally take it out sometime to have fun, and yeah. So these are our personal impressions about these two 1970s macro lenses, and of course we always hope that this was helpful to you. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and our comparative review of these two 1970s 60mm f2.8 macro lenses. The Carl Zeiss S-Planar on the one hand and the Leitz Elmarit-R on the other hand. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. We hope to see you soon. Bye.